Tuesday began like any other. Alarm at 5:45 a.m., stumbling through darkened hallways to the kitchen, flicking on lights one by one until the room brightened enough for me to see my reflection in the stainless steel fridge door. I poured coffee as black as guilt into my favorite travel mug, the one I'd bought on clearance that first year I decided to try adulting on a serious budget. Steam curled from its rim as I tapped out a quick message to my boss. Running 5 minutes late, kids emergency. I shrugged at my own words. I was late every Tuesday. That's how the weekend's chaos bled into the work week. Soccer kits, violin recitals, science fair glue disasters. My phone buzzed. Delilah. Her text arrived with 5 blank spaces before it, as if she'd tapped the screen in annoyance and then remembered to speak. Remember, don't make plans for next week. I paused mid-sip, mouth full of bitterness. I pictured us, suitcases at the door, passports in hand, toasting with hotel lobbies and cocktails. Babe, are we going somewhere? I typed, fingers hovering. Oh. She replied a beat later, too long for a casual response. It's just a girls' trip. Me, Talia, and Mom. We're taking her to Sapphire Valley for her 60th. I blinked. A vacation launched without me, and I wasn't even family escort or designated driver. I waited for the punchline. The laugh track that would tell me this was a joke, that she'd been testing my jealousy, that she'd be gasping with laughter in 30 seconds. Instead, we figured you could watch the kids while we're gone. 5 children, ages 18 months to 11 years. Feeding schedules, bedtime routines, bickering over tablets and chores. I tapped a reply. So I'm a nanny now? You booked me for 5 days of child management. Her answer came swift and clipped, just like last summer. The screen dimmed, and I stared into the black rectangle, feeling the weight of unseen hands pinning my shoulders to the ground. I went to work the regular Monday through Friday grind, running calls with clients about quarterly audits and budget forecasts, but my head clouded over the usual numbers. The blinking cursor in my spreadsheet blurred into the shape of their smiling faces, Delilah's proud grin when I'd surprised her with front-row concert tickets, Talia's laughter at my dad jokes. My mom's teary hug when I'd driven 3 hours to bring casserole after her hip surgery. No, I was invisible. I existed only to fill gaps, only to keep the household afloat. By Friday evening, I felt hollowed out. I drove to Marion's house, my mother-in-law's, where the family briefing was scheduled. The living room smelled of lavender sachets and antiseptic. Marion stood beside an easel displaying laminated papers. One labeled Kids Allergy List, another Emergency Contacts, and a third Approved Snack Options. Delilah and Talia hovered behind her, their eyes bright with shared excitement. Marion handed me a typed schedule. Wake at 7, breakfast at 7:30, playground at 10, lunch at 12, nap contingent on weather, swimming at 3, dinner at 6, bedtime story at 8. It'll be just a few days, she said with a maternal squeeze. And they all adore Uncle Jared. Only I could feel the pinch of the sweetness in that title. I tried to offer a lifeline. What if we hire a sitter part of the time? Or split days so I can work on Tuesday afternoon? I suggested, voice gentle, hopeful. Delilah's fork hovered midair. Talia's lips curved in amusement. Why are you being so difficult? Delilah asked, eyes narrowing. Marion chimed in with a chuckle. You don't have kids of your own. This is a rare chance for bonding. Talia snorted. Come on, Jared. You'd hate Sapphire Valley. Too many nature trails. They labeled my hesitation as resistance, recast my concern as petulance. I sat there, fork untouched, letting them reshape my words into evidence of my own selfishness. Back home that night, I stared at the ceiling until I could sketch every crack in the plaster. I felt the press of memory, how I'd bankrolled Delilah's boutique with personal loans, how I'd driven Marion to chemo appointments in the dead of winter, how I'd carved out weekends to coach my daughter's soccer team. Every sacrifice had been made willingly, fueled by love and loyalty. But never did I imagine a reward of exclusion. Never did I imagine I'd earn a reprieve only in being perpetually useful. In the pre-dawn hush of Saturday, I pulled out my laptop, heart pounding as I searched for flights. 12 hours later, with adrenaline and a touch of dread, I booked a week in Belize, oceanfront bungalow, breakfast delivered by the sea, rum in a coconut shell. I entered first-class upgrades, private transfers, and peak check-in times designed to remind me what it meant to be a traveler rather than a custodian. At midnight, I clicked confirm, packed my bags in stealth, and switched my phone to airplane mode. Monday morning, they awoke to find notes chalked on the front door. Back Friday. Emergency? Call Darren. The house stood silent, frigid. Diaper bags and backpacks abandoned on the porch spoke volumes. My phone lay dormant. No alarms buzzed. No demands pinged. I watched from 30,000 feet as their calls rolled into the void. In Belize, dawn cracked over a horizon of coral blue. I walked into the surf, letting the waves lap at my ankles and kneecaps, dredging rhythm from the ocean's lullaby. No text messages. No panicked calendars. Just salt air and the sun's promise. I let the phone pull away my tension, each step southward marking distance from obligation. For the first time, I wasn't Uncle Jared, the backup plan. I was simply Jared, the man who booked his own flight, claimed his own time, defined his own value. When I finally reactivated my phone in the airport lounge, the screen shook under the weight of missed calls and messages. But they no longer held the power to cage me. I breathed, fully surrendering to the tremor of relief that ran through me. This wasn't abandonment, it was awakening. And as I stepped into the evening sky, boarding the plane for home, I felt something I hadn't in years. Curiosity for my own future, my own heartbeat, my own life beyond the margins assigned to me. I arrived at Marion's house before the sun had fully surrendered to morning, parking on the gravel drive beside her immaculate hedges and walking up to a door framed by climbing roses. My palms felt damp against the steering wheel as I fumbled for my keys. Inside, the air smelled of fresh bread and something floral. Lavender sachets, I guessed, to mask the antiseptic from the medical visits Marion insisted on airing out. The living room, normally a sanctuary of muted pastels and family photos, had been transformed into a command center. A long folding table sat in the center, covered with color-coded printouts, sticky notes, and charts clipped neatly into binders. I recognized the typeface on the schedule, Delilah's, and the crisp clarity of the bullet points screamed more planning than affection. Delilah stood to greet me, coffee cup in hand, her smile measured and polite, one she reserved for family gatherings designed to convince outsiders that everything was perfectly orchestrated beneath the surface. Talia hovered beside her, scrolling through her phone as though she'd rather be anywhere else. Marion brightened when she saw me and handed me a thick binder labeled Family Care Protocol, complete with tab sections for dietary restrictions, behavioral notes, and entertainment options. I opened it to find photographs of lunchboxes with labeled compartments, emergency pharmacy numbers for each child's specific allergy, and even more chilling, a list of penalties for screen time violations. I closed the binder carefully, setting it on the coffee table as if it were a ticking clock. "Jared," Marion said, patting my arm, her voice soft enough to evoke guilt. "Thank you for doing this. We really couldn't have gone without you." Her eyes glistened with unwarranted pride, as if I'd planned this entire trip just to give her a break. I cleared my throat. "Of course." I glanced at the clock on the mantel, 5:58. The briefing was scheduled for 6. Promptness was key, I'd learned long ago. If I showed tardiness, they'd label me unreliable, uncommitted, difficult. Better to be punctual and numb than questioned and resentful. They launched into instructions. Pack each child 2 swimsuits, one for the pool at the country club, one for the splash pad in the town square. Ensure everyone drinks 8 ounces of water every hour and log it on the hydration chart. No peanut products under any circumstances, even pesto was off limits. Bedtime stories would be dictated by rotating sign-up sheets. Everyone needed a nap at 2 p.m. to prevent overtired meltdowns. Their voices conflated into a monotone hum as I scribbled notes, nodding at intervals that felt too sparse to register genuine understanding. I blinked back the heat behind my eyes. This wasn't a dinner conversation. It was an audition for a role I never asked to play. They ushered me into the kitchen, where a stack of takeout menus lay arranged by cuisine: Italian, Mexican, Thai, pizzas. Someone had already circled options for each meal, with calorie counts and spice levels annotated in neat handwriting. "You can't eat the kids' leftovers," Delilah reminded me, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We need to track their calorie intake to stick to the doctor's plan." I swallowed, thinking of the peanut butter toast I'd eaten for breakfast 15 minutes ago. "Got it." My voice sounded small in that spacious room. After 15 minutes, they wiped their palms on napkins, gave one last once-over of the chart, and prepared to depart. Delilah slipped a pre-charged walkie-talkie into my pocket. "In case of emergency," she said. Talia presented an emergency contact list in waterproof laminate. Marion kissed each child goodbye at the door, whispering secrets and squeezes that belonged to a private world I wasn't invited into. The children patted my shoulders like I was their camp counselor, I sparkling with excitement for the days ahead. It was all a performance, my role written in invisible ink, my lines rehearsed in their minds. I watched as the SUV pulled away, taillights dancing among the hedges, and I closed the door behind them with an audible click. The house sighed into silence, leaving me alone with the binders, the walkie-talkie, and a home that felt foreign. The first call came at 9:07 a.m., Uncle Jared. My oldest daughter said through the receiver, voice bright, "I'm hungry." My stomach pitched. I stood at the counter, staring at the laminated menu choices. Cheese quesadillas, carrot sticks, apple slices? I offered. "Yes, please, but only half the carrot sticks," she replied. "I don't like orange food." My jaw clenched. Carrots were orange. Everything was orange. I jotted down her precise preference, noting to only slice 6 sticks and leave them unseasoned. By 11:30, I'd fed 2 toddlers half portions of macaroni and cheese, the version with peas tucked inside because the chart said, add veggies, while refereeing a dispute over who got which sticker on their chore chart. The house buzzed with intermittent calls from friends of my kids requesting FaceTime playdates, each one triggering another entry on the social engagement log. I felt the edges of my composure fray as I sorted color-coded laundry, following Marion's diagram of pair white socks with reds, no exceptions. My phone chimed with a calendar alert. 2 p.m. nap time. Begin wind-down routine. I half-listened to a podcast on productivity hacks, trying to focus on the speaker's words as the toddler monitor crackled and the dishwasher beeped 5 times in rapid succession. At 2:03, the eldest refused to lie down. "I'm not tired," she declared, flopping onto the couch. I hesitated. The binder said maintain schedule. Reality said defuse the tantrum before it escalated. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and improvised. "Okay, how about we read 2 short stories, and then you can play quietly in your room?" She looked at me like I'd cast a miracle, hopped up with a grin, and ran to her bookcase. I exhaled, shoulders releasing a knot I hadn't realized I'd been holding. When bedtime arrived at 8 p.m., I guided the kids into pajamas, tucked them under covers, and stood at the doorway until the last pair of eyelids fluttered closed. My legs ached from squatting to tuck monster-fighting nightlights under mattresses, and my throat rasped from reading Goodnight Moon 17 times in 3 separate bedrooms. The clock read 8:27. According to Marion's plan, I had precisely 33 minutes to wash dishes and prep breakfast before lights out in the staff bedroom, i.e., the couch in the den. I slumped onto the couch with a single sheet of parchment, a list of universally approved bedtime snacks, and microwaved a leftover granola bar. I sipped lukewarm milk from a cup labeled emergency cocoa only and tried to recall what it felt like to make plans for myself. I scrolled through texts from my friends, "Hey man, football this weekend?" and stared at the outline of my own name in blue. A dull ache pulsed in my chest as I realized I'd canceled my own Tuesday plans, Saturday plans, entire next week, all for this. All to prove I could be reliable, to show them I cared. And yet, I was still nameless in their itinerary, still the invisible scaffolding holding their structure upright. As the house settled into silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator, I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness something I hadn't allowed myself to think. This isn't love. This is a script written for me by people who never asked if I wanted to be an actor. And tomorrow, maybe I'd flip the page and start writing my own lines. That Friday evening, I found myself back at Marion's dining table, as if drawn by gravity into their orbit of scheduled affection. The china plates were laid out in precise symmetry, each napkin folded to match the intricate pattern on the tablecloth. The chandelier above cast a warm glow that felt almost conspiratorial, like an audience leaning in to watch a performance. Delilah, Talia, and Marion settled into their seats with the ease of practiced hosts, while I claimed the chair at the head, the only space that felt both central and strangely detached. I pressed my palms into my lap, feeling the dampness of anticipation. I had rehearsed my line a dozen times on the drive over, pretending it would sound casual and collaborative. What if we hired a sitter for part of the trip? Or maybe split the week, so I can work some days and spend time with you all the rest. Marion's eyes locked onto mine with the sweetness of a hostage negotiator promising leniency. "But honey," she said, voice pitched just high enough to sound coaxing, "we've already arranged everything. We'd hate to inconvenience you." She traced a fingertip along the rim of her wine glass. In her world, My inconvenience was negligible, an unavoidable ripple in the smooth pond of family solidarity. Talia snorted, not trying to hide her amusement. Come on, Jared. You barely see the kids most weekdays. Don't you deserve a break from them, too? Her laugh was low and dismissive, echoing in the room like someone flipped on a harsh spotlight. I felt my cheeks flush, a slow burn that radiated from my chest to my face. I blinked once, twice, as I processed their response. Delilah set her fork down with a clink. Why are you being so difficult? Her words hung in the air, dripping with incredulity. I opened my mouth to answer, to explain my calendar, my deadlines, my own plans, but the sentences tangled in my throat. Instead, I leaned forward and spoke slowly, deliberately. I want to help, of course, but I'm also asking to feel included and respected. If that means hiring a sitter or rearranging so I can maintain my work, why is that unreasonable? The question felt righteous on my tongue, an appeal to decency I hadn't dared voice before. Silence stretched taut around us, pierced only by the quiet clatter of silverware laid aside and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Marian tilted her head, eyes narrowing ever so slightly, betraying the first flicker of annoyance I'd ever seen in her. Jared, she began, her tone sweet but firm, you don't have children of your own. This is a chance for you to learn how bonding works. You might even enjoy it. Her words felt like a gauntlet thrown at my feet, as though my lack of biological parenthood disqualified me from autonomy or respect. Talia leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. Exactly, she agreed. You're not exactly the life of the party. You'd be bored. She smirked, as if branding me lazy and dull were a public service. A knot tightened in my stomach, winding around my sense of self like a steel cable. All my life, I'd navigated expectations, work parties, social norms, family obligations, with a willingness to please and adapt. But in that moment, I recognized their maneuver for what it was, an attempt to frame my request for consideration as selfishness. I swallowed hard and inhaled the scent of rosemary from the centerpiece, letting it anchor me. I appreciate your confidence in me, I said, voice calm though my heart pounded, but accepting a responsibility doesn't require me to sacrifice my own life entirely. I'm asking for partnership, not a handout. Delilah's lips thinned as she glanced at Talia, then back at me, as though debating whether to pivot or press forward. Finally, she took a slow breath and leaned in, fingers drumming the surface of her plate. You're really making this about you, she said softly. We're trying to do something special for Mom, and instead of supporting us, you're complaining. The accusation hung heavy in the air. At that instant, I felt the weight of their expectations and the fragility of my standing in their private narrative. I opened my mouth to defend my position when Talia's voice cut in again. You know, Uncle Jared, you need to loosen up. Plan B is just as fun as the original plan. You'll see. I looked around the table at their faces, Marian's polite concern, Delilah's wounded impatience, Talia's mocking grin, and realized how neatly they'd rehearsed this scene. I was supposed to crumble, to acquiesce, to embrace the role they'd written for me. But I didn't. I met Delilah's gaze. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said, each word measured and clear, because I see it as the opposite of support. I see it as exclusion. And I'd rather not be part of a celebration where I'm only needed as a backup. Their expression shifted. Marian's sympathy flickering to surprise, Delilah's irritation softening into confusion, Talia's contempt giving way to something like discomfort. We never meant to, Marian started, but I held up my hand. I understand you planned this with love, I said gently. But love isn't forcing someone into a corner. It's listening when they ask for a moment of respect in return. I exhaled, feeling a release as though I'd undone some knot inside me. Delilah's fork hovered above her plate, abandoned. So what, you're just out? She asked quietly. Her tone wasn't angry anymore. It was wary. Talia's smirk slipped, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. The silence that followed carried the weight of unspoken apologies and recalibrated expectations. I reached across the table, not for her hand, but to rearrange my chair slightly away from the center, making room for my own boundaries for the first time. I'm here, I said, but on equal footing. If that's too much, then I'll plan my own week. In that moment, I saw the three faces before me transform, the perfect script they'd written shattered by a single line of truth. And for the first time, I felt something unfamiliar and exhilarating, the possibility of my own voice carrying weight in this family story. I sat back, letting the tension settle as I waited for their response, knowing that whatever came next, I wouldn't be the invisible anchor pulling at their plans. I was, finally, part of the cast, and I refused to play the understudy in my own life. That night, sleep evaded me the moment I turned off the living room lamp. The soft glow of my laptop lingered on the hardwood floor in front of the couch where I lay, propped up on pillows I'd shifted into a makeshift nest. My fingers hovered over the remote, unwilling to change the muted late-night news still flickering on the television above. Images of world events passed in an endless loop, firefighters trudging through ash, diplomats shaking hands, athletes bending beneath podium lights, yet none of it pierced the fog of my thoughts. Instead, I felt suspended in my own life, as if I were watching from beneath glass, observing someone else's decisions and wondering when I had stopped steering my own course. In the silence between commercials, I reached for my phone and opened the gallery. Photo after photo stared back at me, Delilah's radiant smile on our wedding day. Talia holding our youngest daughter at the hospital just hours after her birth. Mom's face lighting up as I handed her a bouquet of sunflowers on her first birthday after chemo. Each image felt like a tether, anchored to someone else's need, someone else's story. I scrolled past candid shots of birthday parties I'd organized, my own face half obscured behind plates of cake and party hats. I lingered on a picture of Marion in her hospital gown, clasping my hands so tightly I could almost feel the tremor in her bones. In every moment I'd chosen to give, I'd erased a piece of myself. My thumb swiped furiously, as if erasing the past would dissolve the ache in my chest. The kids' volleyball victories, the school recitals where I'd cheered so loudly my voice cracked, the afternoon spent debugging code for my sister's startup, all of it blurred into one overwhelming montage. I realized how seldom I paused to capture images of my own triumphs. A promotion I'd earned through late nights at the office, a cross-country marathon I completed when my knees screamed in protest, a charity gala I'd chaired on behalf of the youth center where I volunteered. Those photos were buried deep, like buried treasure waiting beneath the sediment of family obligations. I closed the gallery, heart pounding, and sat up straighter. My palms pressed against the cool leather of the couch cushions. What if I reclaimed a moment for myself? A stretch of hours that answered to no one's schedule but my own. I slid free of the pillows and located my laptop on the coffee table, its screen still open to a spreadsheet I'd abandoned hours ago. I minimized the window and navigated to a browser tab I'd opened earlier but ignored. Flights to Belize. I'd considered it as a fleeting fantasy, a whispered hope in the back of my mind that I could escape to turquoise waters and palm-fringed sand. Until tonight, it had been just that, a dream too daring to name. My cursor hovered over the search bar. Departing on Tuesday, when Delilah and the girls would be gone, returning the following Monday, giving me a full week of solitude. I clicked through departure times, morning flights, midday layovers, red-eye options, and compared prices. Then I selected first class, reasoning that if I was going to carve out this time, I deserved the comfort and space to reflect without jostling elbows. I chose an oceanfront bungalow with a private terrace, breakfast included, and spa credits I could squander on deep tissue massages until my back stopped screaming from months of stooped posture over toys, laptops, and chore charts. As the total flickered on the screen, I felt a mix of exhilaration and guilt. My finger hovered over the confirm booking button. I pictured Delilah's reaction when she realized I'd declined her invitation by disappearing. I saw Talia's incredulous glare when she found out I had the audacity to design my own schedule. I visualized Marion's furrowed brow as she traced the itinerary for emergency child care only to discover her unpaid helper had slipped away. And yet, beneath all that guilt, something fierce ignited inside me, a protective flame that shielded me from the sorrow I felt at being left out of my own family's adventures. I hesitated for a heartbeat, blinking back a lump in my throat. Then I clicked. The screen transformed into a cascade of confirmation codes and booking details. My name glowed beside seat numbers and reference codes. I printed the itinerary, folding each page neatly before tucking the stack into an envelope. I wrote, "Week of Freedom," in bold letters on the outside and slid it into my briefcase, where it nestled against contract proposals and pay stubs, a declaration of intent prompting me to remember this moment whenever family obligations resurfaced. The clock on my laptop read 12:17 a.m. A chime from my phone signaled a low battery warning, but I ignored it, letting the glow from the screen warm my face as I opened a new document and titled it simply My Week. Beneath it, I typed bullet points: watch sunrise over the beach, read without interruption, snorkel in the reef, journal at will, dine without reheating leftovers, sleep without interruptions. I paused after each line, savoring the sense of agency that pulsed through my fingertips. No due dates, no allergy logs, no bedtime drills, just a curated menu of pleasures tailored exclusively for me. My mind drifted to Belize's cerulean waters, the gentle lap of waves against the shore, the sun's heat tracing patterns on my skin. I imagined the scent of coconut oil mingling with salt spray, the distant aria of seabirds, the soft thrum of a reggae beat drifting from a nearby beach shack. Each vision felt like a brushstroke painting over the grayscale palette of my everyday life. I closed my eyes, inhaling as though I could breathe in the promise of new beginnings. My heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of my aspirations, steady, confident, unwavering. I saved the document, then powered down my laptop and slid it into my backpack. I gathered my passport, wallet, and a change of clothes, tucking each item into the suitcase I'd packed weeks ago in anticipation of a family vacation that would never include me. I placed the bag by the front door, alongside a printed sign I scribbled earlier. Emergency baby duty, Darren. 555-0192. Then, I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb mode, tapping the setting that silenced all but priority contacts. No calls would come through unless they threatened life or limb. Everything else would wait. I stood alone in the doorway, hands stuffed into the pockets of my jeans, listening to the hum of the night beyond the windows. The world felt vast and inviting, unfettered by personal requests or obligations. In the silence, I realized that I had crossed an invisible threshold, from caretaker to individual, from background to foreground. I inhaled again, feeling the air settle in my lungs like a benediction. For the first time in years, I had acted solely for myself, defining my own worth outside the narrow confines of family duty. As I flicked off the hallway light and retreated to bed, I felt the mattress yield to my weight in a way it never had before. I closed my eyes, chest rising and falling with a calm steadiness I hadn't known was possible. Tomorrow would bring questions, likely anger, maybe even tears. But for now, as I drifted towards sleep, I embraced the truth I'd rediscovered, that freedom requires intention, that self-worth cannot be borrowed, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to make a plan that includes only one name, mine. Morning light filtered through slatted blinds as I eased the door closed behind me, already halfway down the driveway with my bags loaded in the trunk. My phone lay on silent in the console, and a faint breeze carried the salty scent of Belize even on Nigeria's humid air. I'd managed 4 full hours of sleep before catching the early flight, and every cell in my body pulsed with anticipation. Today, I would be unreachable. Today, I would live on my own terms. No chore charts, no hydration logs, no guilt for missing someone's dinner plans. My heart thrummed with freedom as I checked my watch and strode to the taxi stand. But high above, fate had a different script. Back at home, the first knock came at precisely 8:17 a.m. A firm, insistent rap as though someone balanced urgency on the threshold. Neighbor Darren, tasked as my emergency backup, watched through the living room window in alarm as 5 small faces pressed against the glass behind him. Their eyes, wide and uncertain, flicked between the locked door and his concerned expression. "He's not here," Darren whispered, glancing at the cluster of bewildered children. "Call him." Inside the cab, I lingered over the confirmation email one more time, savored the taste of rebellion. The driver, oblivious to my detour into autonomy, navigated the morning traffic with steady calm. I pictured their faces as they realized I'd fled, Delilah's stunned silence, Talia's outraged glare, Marian's brows drawn tight in confusion. But I refused to flinch beneath the weight of their expectations. I leaned back in the plush seat and exhaled. At home, the doorbell rang again, this time a stream of shouts and banging that rattled the windows. "Uncle Jared." My eldest daughter's voice cracked with urgency. "Open up." For a moment, her tone carried hope. Then it soured into panic. The toddler, clutching a stuffed rabbit, peered anxiously over the threshold, and my middle 2 children tugged at Darren's pant legs, tears welling in their eyes. No one had a spare key. No one knew the code to the security system. The binder of schedules lay useless inside, and the walkie-talkie's batteries had long since drained. In the silence between knocks, their confusion became a chorus. "Where is he? Mom said he'd be here. What are we supposed to do now?" I sat upright as the cab merged onto the expressway, my palms growing damp. I pictured the house empty of its usual anchor, each room echoing with unanswered pleas. At the curb, I noticed a cafe plastered with colorful flyers advertising early morning breakfast and chilled juices. A man in a crisp uniform unloaded croissants onto the counter, and for an instant, I envied his routine. I envied anyone whose obligations came with clear instructions and backup plans. My throat tightened. I realized I hadn't factored in their reliance on me. I hadn't accounted for the way my absence would fracture the fragile structure they treated as dependable. My chest ached as the cab pulled into the airport drop-off. I paid the driver, grabbed my luggage, and paused in the terminal vestibule, the roar of departure boards overhead pressing down on me. Belize beckoned with turquoise hope, but my conscience tugged at my sleeve. I tried to quell the rising guilt, the memory of those small faces pressed to glass, the emptiness I left behind. I reminded myself that I'd earned this time, that their crisis was born of my own courage to say no. Still, guilt seeped through, relentless and insistent. I switched my phone off airplane mode and braced for the storm of messages I'd ignored. The screen lit up with dozens of alerts, missed calls, texts, unread voicemails. I resisted the urge to check them now. Instead, I tucked the phone away and boarded the plane, retreating into the white noise hum of passengers buckling belts and rolling carry-ons. As the jetliner rumbled down the runway, I stared out the window at the tarmac below, feeling the ground slip away beneath me. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3, anchoring myself to the present. Back in the neighborhood, Darren had summoned reinforcements. A chain of neighbors arrived. The mailman, the gardener, a friend from church, all trying keys, peering through windows, calling emergency contacts. They picked up the messenger's phone numbers from the laminate list, dialed and redialed, and each time met my voicemail greeting. At one point, Marion sprinted down the street, clutching her purse and a syringe of epinephrine, prepared for any allergic reaction, but found only silence. The house trembled with frustration as she pounded on the door, tears of worry mingling with shame at her own planning. On the plane, I closed my eyes as the engines roared, trying to still my mind. I reminded myself that this was the price of boundaries, the cost of self-preservation. I replayed the family dinner where I dared to ask for consideration, the moment Marion's eyes widened at my insistence. I felt the echo of her tremor, the tiny fracture that my refusal had created. And I held on to that, the proof that standing up for myself could reshape their expectations, could force them to confront the fragility of their assumptions. The seatbelt sign chimed off, and I leaned forward, tugged my bag from the overhead bin, and strode down the aisle into virgin territory. At the window seat, I sank in and watched the world fall away. Houses shrinking into dots, highways turning into threads, lives untethered from the familiar grid of schedules. I felt a mixture of sorrow for the children's confusion and relief for my own liberation. Neither emotion negated the other. They existed in tandem, a testament to the complexity of love and responsibility. By the time we leveled off over the Caribbean Sea, I'd resolved to face the aftermath with the same resolve I used to face my own desires. I would answer the calls eventually, but only after reclaiming enough space to stand on my own ground. I would offer apologies for the panic I'd caused, but not for asking to be treated as an equal. And I would arrive home stronger, clearer, more certain of my value as a participant rather than a servant in my own family's narrative. Below me, the water shimmered with promise. I closed my eyes as the sun warmed the fuselage, feeling gratitude for the journey and determination for the return. The doorbell's echo would fade with time, and new routines would take shape, ones that would include respect for my time as readily as theirs. And in that promise, I found comfort, a life where I was more than a weekend nanny, more than a background extra, more than a backup plan. I was, finally, the author of my own chapter. I woke to the steady susurrus of ocean waves instead of the frantic chirping of my alarm. Morning light filtered through sheer curtains and soft, liquid bands that danced across the teak floor. For the first time in memory, I didn't glance at my phone or scan a to-do list. Instead, I rose, stretching limbs that felt unaccustomed to such spacious freedom. The air inside the bungalow carried a gentle saltiness and the faint sweetness of exotic flowers blooming outside. Tucked into a corner of the porch was a wooden lounge chair overlooking the beach. I slid onto it in bare feet, cradling a fresh coconut pressed into my palm. As I tilted it toward my lips, the cool, subtly sweet water tasted of liberation. I spent the rest of the morning wandering along the shoreline, letting my footprints trace a path that ended only when the tide blurred them into the sand. No child cried for snacks, no clipboard hovered beneath my elbow, and no neighbor's dog scratched at the gate. Instead, only the call of distant seabirds and the whisper of surf accompanied my thoughts. I marveled at how quietly the world could move when unburdened by obligation. In that stillness, I allowed myself to recall long-neglected dreams, rebuilding the old motorcycle I'd inherited from my father, taking evening classes in digital photography, writing that short story I'd sketched on napkins years ago. Each aspiration had felt frivolous next to the gravity of family duties. Here, they shimmered again like possibilities I'd almost forgotten existed. By midday, hunger nudged me back toward the bungalow's kitchenette, where I found fresh fruit arranged in a hand-woven basket, mango slices, papaya spears, and sticky clusters of sweet pineapple. I sat at the small dining table, savoring each bite without cutting anyone else's portions in half, without worrying whether the youngest would choke on seeds. I read a few pages of a novel I'd brought, irreverent, carefree prose that made me chuckle aloud. And for once, the sound wasn't a rehearsal of tone for bedtime stories. It was simply laughter born of stories meant for a man unshackled. In the afternoon, I donned the provided snorkel gear and slipped into the crystalline lagoon. The world below the surface was an otherworldly cathedral of coral and fish, vibrant parrotfish nibbling at waving sea plants, schools of silver darts dispersing before me, and shafts of sunlight filtering through the water in pillar-like columns. I pressed my fingertips to a corroded anchor embedded in the sand, imagining it once tethered vessels that ferried pilgrims and merchants alike. Here, I felt a deep kinship with explorers. Men and women who risked the unknown, charted new courses, and returned with stories that widened the world's horizon. That evening, as the sun tumbled down in a blaze of orange and magenta, I crossed the sandbar to a thatched roof bar built on stilts over the water. Locals strummed gentle rhythms on steel drums, and the scent of grilled fish mingled with coconut marinade. I ordered a simple dinner, freshly caught snapper, seasoned with lime and local herbs, and sipped a mango daiquiri while watching the lagoon's edge glow like molten jewels. Across the water, the bungalow lights winked back, offering a warm reminder of solitude rather than loneliness. Back in my room, I stood at the open doorway, breathing in the night air infused with hibiscus and sea salt. Empty chairs lined the porch, each awaiting an occupant who would not arrive. I realized that this silence wasn't barren, it was fertile ground for rediscovery. Without schedules or requests, I had reclaimed a space to ask myself what mattered, what I truly wanted, and what I was willing to demand for my own well-being. Before drifting off to sleep on a bed uncrumpled by midnight feedings or storytime negotiations, I scribbled in a small journal. Today, I remembered how to listen to my own heartbeat, to the murmur of the sea, to the cadence of my unguarded thoughts. For the first time, I felt a clarity that had always been elusive beneath the weight of others' needs. I am entitled to my own life, my own experiences, and my own moments of unstructured wonder. And as I closed the journal, a profound peace settled within me, deeper than the ocean I had explored, a promise that whenever life tried to revert to old patterns, I would return to this view, this silence, and renew my vow to live unapologetically off the clock. I stepped off the tarmac with a sense of triumph, the sun glaring off the polished walkway like a spotlight on my newfound liberty. I retrieved my phone from my pocket and flipped it out of airplane mode, ready to confront the world I'd left behind. The screen erupted in a cascade of numbers, 81 missed calls, 113 text messages, 6 voicemails, and a flurry of app notifications that blurred together in a frantic mosaic. My chest tightened as I tapped the call log, half expecting a symphony of beeps and pleading voices to pour from the speaker. I summoned the courage to listen to the first voicemail, Delilah's voice, tight with accusation and hurt. "Jared, what the hell is wrong with you? You abandoned us." The kids were freaking out. Marion nearly had a heart attack. "Call me back now, or don't bother coming home." Her words crackled through the receiver, a mixture of panic and rage that both stung and pained me. I swallowed hard, rubbing my fingertips across my lips, as though trying to erase the echo of her hurt. Next came Talia's message, shorter but equally cutting. "This is so selfish. It's Mom's birthday. You ruined everything. You can't just vanish." Her tone was icy, a wedge driven between us by my act of defiance. I pressed pause and traced my finger along the phone's edge, recalling her laughter at our dinner table, the way she used to lean on my shoulder for family gossip. Now her warmth had hardened into a blade. I felt guilt prick at my conscience, but also a flicker of something else, pride in the boundary I had drawn. One by one, I scrolled through the barrage of text messages. You're being petty. I hope you're happy alone. Do you even care about these kids? You're dead to us. The words spun around in my head, a cyclone of blame that threatened to suck me back into their orbit. I could almost see the shadow of their disappointment stretching across my living room floor, blotting out the sunlit promise I'd chased in Belize. But beneath the swirl of condemnation lay a quieter current. Each message betrayed their assumption that I existed solely to serve them, that my identity hinged on the roles they assigned. A new voicemail lit up, Marian's trembling voice. Please, dear, I just want to know you're safe. I'm sorry if we hurt you, but the kids need you. I need you. Call me. Her plea cut through my anger like a ray of light through storm clouds. I closed my eyes, picturing her gentle hands in chemo gloves, the worry etched into her face as she navigated hospital corridors. My heart ached at the thought of her fear, of her longing for the steady presence I'd always provided without question. At the airport cafe, I took a seat by a window overlooking the runway, the distant roar of engines a reminder that flight offers both escape and return. I muted my phone, silencing the bleeps and buzzes that demanded my attention. I unfolded the printed itinerary from my pocket, the one stamped with confirmations and seat assignments, and laid it flat on the table. Each reservation felt like a testament to my choice, a week of solitude purchased with intention and self-respect. I opened the first text from Delilah. You're quitting on us. I typed a reply. I'm not quitting. I'm reclaiming. But I deleted it before hitting send. I deleted the next. You'll regret this. And the one after. You're a coward. Instead, I set the phone face down and inhaled deeply, letting the scent of espresso and coconut oil mingle in my lungs. I reminded myself that my silence now was more powerful than any immediate defense. I needed this space to process their reactions, to craft a response that wouldn't crumble under emotional pressure. My gaze drifted back to the itinerary. Arrival at 8 a.m., spa appointment at 10:30, snorkeling excursion at 2:00, beachside dinner at sunset. The sequence of delights promised a reprieve from the storm of messages, a buffer zone to rebuild my center. I sipped my iced coffee, cold against my throat, and let the ice clink in the glass, a gentle percussion that steadied my pulse. The children's emergency calls receded into background noise, replaced by the methodical churn of airport machinery and distant conversations in multiple languages. By the time I boarded the shuttle to my resort, I had forged a tentative resolve. I would return their calls, not with apologies that erased my agency, but with words that honored both their needs and my own. I would listen to Marian's plea with compassion, acknowledging the chaos I caused, yet also affirming that my time away was about healing my spirit, not abandoning my love for them. I would tell Delilah that I needed respect as much as I needed assistance. And to Talia, I would explain that boundaries were not betrayals but acts of self-care that ultimately modeled healthy behavior for the kids. As the shuttle glided toward the palm-lined entrance, I sent one brief message. I'm safe. I love you all. I'll call when I'm ready. It was neither an apology nor a feast of justification, just a bridge, short but sturdy, spanning the gap between their expectations and my autonomy. The reply came minutes later. Fine. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't a door slammed shut. It was space. When the shuttle doors opened onto the resort's manicured grounds, I stepped out into a pocket of calm. A gentle wind rustled the fronds overhead, and the distant promise of waves echoed through the air. In that moment, I felt the tension uncoil in my shoulders. The messages still hummed in my pocket, but they no longer commanded my every breath. I pocketed the phone, squared my shoulders against the breeze, and walked forward into the promise of my own chapter. Anchored not by guilt, but by the steady knowledge that to serve others well, I first must stand firmly in my own truth. 2 days later, the knock came at my Belize bungalow door just as the sun was slipping below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. I paused in the doorway, towel slung around my waist, and watched Delilah step inside without waiting for an invitation. Behind her, Talia's arms were crossed so tightly they seemed to brace her chest, and Marian hovered at the threshold, face as pale as the stucco walls. My heart thumped in my rib cage. a jagged drumbeat that matched the urgent rhythm of the crashing waves outside. Delilah's eyes bore into me with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You made us look like fools," she said, voice low but trembling. "We told everyone you'd be watching the kids. We told your friends, our friends, everyone. And now you're thousands of miles away." She planted her hands on her hips, the silhouette of her stance cutting a sharp line through the air. Talia stepped forward, her cheeks flushed. "You humiliated your wife," she added, tension sharpening her words like an accusation. I let them stand there, letting the weight of their disappointment settle around us like storm clouds. The scent of salt water clung to my skin and mingled with the perfume of tropical blooms just beyond the door. I knew they'd followed my travel itinerary. Delilah must have tracked the flight updates and somehow navigated local contacts to find me here. For a moment, I wondered if they'd chartered a plane, but no, their presence felt more like a reckoning than a rescue. I closed the distance between us slowly, folding my towel over a hook and reaching for a shirt. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I began, voice measured. "But you planned an entire vacation without asking if I was available. You assumed I'd say yes." I slid the shirt on, letting the fabric brush against my damp skin, and met Delilah's gaze. That assumption erased my own life. "And yes, it disrupted your plans. But you took my time and my choice for granted." Marian's lips quivered as she clutched her purse. "Sweetheart, you didn't need to go to Belize to tell us how you feel." Her plea trembled with both fatigue and relief, as though she'd carried this confrontation inside her prayer for days. "We were wrong," she said, voice catching. "We should have asked." Delilah shook her head, arms dropping to her sides. "Asking wouldn't have changed anything. You wouldn't have admitted you had plans of your own. You never do." Her anger crumpled into something more vulnerable, and I saw her shoulders slump. Talia, silent now, watched us from the doorway, uncertainty flickering behind her guarded expression. I inhaled deeply, the humid air filling my lungs. "I did have plans," I said quietly. Plans that didn't revolve around filling in for someone else's arrangements. Plans to exist outside the margins you assigned me. I stepped onto the porch and gestured to the wooden lounge chair where I'd first tasted freedom. The fading light made the ocean beyond sparkle like a field of shattered sapphires. "I needed this space," I continued, turning back to face them. "Not to punish you, but to remember who I am when I'm not acting in service of your needs." Delilah folded her arms, gaze distant. "But what about us? The kids? The birthday cake you missed? The trip we planned for Mom all year?" Her voice cracked on the last syllable. She swallowed hard. "You could have helped make it special." I looked toward the sea, feeling its vastness mirror the expanse where my own identity had drifted. "I know," I admitted, "and I'm sorry for the panic I caused, for leaving the kids stranded and for hurting Mom. But I won't apologize for taking time for myself. You lost sight of the fact that I'm part of this family, an equal part, not just a servant." Marian stepped forward, brushing a hand against Delilah's arm. "He's right," she said softly. "We made a terrible error. We see that now." She turned to me, tears glinting in her eyes. "Can you forgive us?" Her voice was small, but the courage behind it was real. Talia hesitated, then nodded, her own eyes betraying relief that the storm had broken. I let the silence stretch, weight balance between all of us. The ocean's roar filled the space, and I realized I craved this moment of honest reckoning more than any chore-free week. "Yes," I said finally, "I forgive you. But we need new ground rules." My voice was calm but firm. "From now on, major plans, vacations, birthdays, anything that pulls me away, must be discussed with me in advance. I'm your husband, your father figure, your son. I want to be included." Delilah blinked back tears. "Agreed," she whispered. Talia nodded, and even Marian's posture softened. We stood together on that porch, a family reshaped by boundaries and honesty. The wind tugged at the coconut palms overhead, and the first stars blinked awake in the indigo sky. In the hush that followed, a sense of equilibrium settled around us. We had weathered the storm at my door, and now, for the first time, I felt the promise of a truer unity built on respect rather than assumption. I returned home on a humid Tuesday evening, suitcase still heavy with sand and salt, expecting a tense reunion, but hoping for a semblance of normalcy. I stepped through the door and into silence. The house smelled of lingering antiseptic and half-washed dishes, the kind of sterile aroma that follows chaos rather than calm. My eyes swept across the living room, the children's artwork tacked to the fridge, the abandoned walkie-talkie on the coffee table, the chore chart still pinned to the bulletin board, even the pens lay beside it, and used. The silence felt sacred, A fragile pause after months of background noise. I stood still, letting the quiet settle around me like dew on grass, before I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting messages of apology or recrimination, but instead found a flurry of social media notifications. I opened the family group chat, dozens of unread messages, but no new voice from me. Instead, I'd been replaced by heated debates, tearful confessions, and condescending lectures, all spelled out in text bubbles. Talia had replaced our group name with unavailable, a bitter joke that stung more than I expected. Delilah had posted a cryptic status, "Some people only care about themselves." Marion, ever diplomatic, had shared a quote about sacrifice and family duty. Beneath it, her own note, "Family means sacrifice, even when inconvenient." I scrolled further and saw that Delilah had changed her profile photo to a picture of our family at last year's reunion, me conspicuously turned away, phone in hand. The choice was deliberate, a public erasure of my presence. I felt a hollow ache bloom in my chest, then recede under a layer of cool resolve. I slipped the phone into my pocket and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the covers aside with measured care. The air felt thick, filled with the ghosts of meals not shared and responsibilities unmet. I let my gaze linger on the empty pillows where my children would normally wake me with sticky kisses. No laughter echoed through the halls. No arguments about screen time. No urgent calls for snacks. For once, I had nothing to schedule, nothing to fix, nothing to manage, just space to breathe. That night, I slept on my own terms. No monitor crackling, no whispered prayers for baby fever. I rose before dawn, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and brewed a pot of coffee for myself. I measured each scoop with deliberate slowness, honoring the act of self-care. At the kitchen table, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd started in Belize, and wrote, "Homecoming. Observations, silence, solitude, removal. Emotions, relief, emptiness, curiosity." Then I paused, finger tapping the page, and wrote, "What now?" By mid-morning, word had trickled through the neighborhood that I was back. Neighbor Darren popped his head in, the same friend who'd fumbled through my emergency plan 2 days earlier. He perched on a stool by the counter, brow furrowed. "How are you holding up?" he asked, voice low. His concern felt genuine, untainted by schedules or agendas. I offered a small smile and said, "Better than expected." He nodded. "They've taken it hard," he said of my family. "But I think they needed to see how much you do." His words echoed in my mind. Perhaps my absence had been the mirror they refused to look into. The first real confrontation came when Delilah arrived home. She stepped into the kitchen as I finished my second cup, hair pulled into a tight bun, cheeks flushed from crying. She looked at me like she saw a stranger, someone who'd spent a week across an ocean without her. "We need to talk," she said, her tone even, without the shrill edge of accusation. I nodded toward an empty chair. "I'd like that." She sat, hands clasped on the table, and I studied the changes in her face, the faint shadows under her eyes, the loosened tension in her jaw. She took a shuddering breath. "I was angry," she began, voice quivering. "I felt abandoned, humiliated. But I also realized how much I relied on you, even for things I took for granted." Her eyes glistened. "The kids kept asking for you. They cried." I saw their confusion. I swallowed and reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. "I'm sorry for leaving you all in panic. I never wanted to cause hurt." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know you needed this." She paused. "But I need you too." Marion joined us then, bringing a pot of tea and 3 mugs. She placed mine in front of me with a tender smile. "I was selfish," she admitted, voice soft. "I thought I knew what was best for everyone. I forgot to ask what you needed." Talia, too, appeared from the hallway, looking unsure but determined. She slid into the last chair, arms folded but her eyes honest. "I was teasing you about not being fun," she said, "but I didn't mean you had no life outside of us." She swallowed. "I'm sorry." We sat there, 4 people at a kitchen table, a tableau of reconciliation. Steam rose from the mugs, carrying the scent of chamomile and mint. In that moment, I felt the dizzying power of simply being seen. Over the next day, conversations unfolded like petals. We discussed boundaries and expectations, negotiating terms for future plans. We agreed that any family event required a family council meeting at least 2 weeks in advance. We drafted a schedule that honored everyone's needs, my work commitments, Delilah's self-care rituals, the children's routines, and Marion's health appointments. We color-coded the calendar on the fridge, each name assigned a hue, and promised to respect the blocks we each claimed. It felt revolutionary, this joint ownership of time, rather than dictation by a single agenda. That evening, we sat down to dinner together for the first time since my return. The table was simple: roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes. Comfort food made with intention rather than haste. We lit candles and placed a small bouquet of fresh flowers in the center. The children's plates were filled, but no chore charts dangled above their heads. They smiled at me with genuine warmth, and in their eyes I saw relief rather than confusion. We began to talk about their week, about my trip, about the upcoming science fair, and the holiday we would plan together. Laughter rose around the table, honest and unforced, like music rediscovered. Later, as I cleaned the dishes, I noticed the group chat still glowing on the phone. I opened it and found new messages. One from Talia, "Thanks for coming home." One from Delilah, "I love you." One from Marion, "Family means listening." I typed back, "I love you too, and I'm here." Fully. Then I deleted the previous angry posts, restoring our group to a blank slate, an invitation to begin anew. That night, I lay in bed beside Delilah, our hands entwined. In the dark, I whispered, "I needed that trip to know how much I belong here." She squeezed my hand, "And I needed it to know you're not just ours to command." We laughed softly, the sound a quiet echo of an unspoken promise. We would never let each other disappear again. In the days that followed, life resumed its rhythms: school drop-offs, work calls, weekend soccer games, but now with a new harmony. I still coached the kids' team, but only on Saturdays we'd agreed. I still helped Marion with her appointments, but we scheduled them around my work. I still supported Delilah's projects, but she respected my deadlines. Our house buzzed with activity, but beneath it lay a foundation of mutual respect. I realized that the fallout of my departure had been necessary, a crucible that purified our bonds. We emerged stronger, more honest, more connected. And as I looked around that kitchen one morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, children's laughter drifting in, I understood. Family isn't about sacrifice alone. It's about making space for each voice to be heard, each life to be honored, and each person to choose their own path without fear of exclusion. In that understanding, I found not just forgiveness or reconciliation, but the freedom to be fully myself within the circle I cherish most. It has been 3 months since I reclaimed my calendar, my mornings unfolding in unscripted rhythms that belong to me alone. The residual tension that once tightened my chest at the thought of family obligations has dissolved into a quiet confidence. I wake with the sun now, not to coax sleepy children into breakfast, but to lace up my running shoes and trace new routes through my neighborhood, feeling the pulse of my heartbeat in tandem with my footsteps. The thrill of spontaneous decision-making has become a reliable companion, no longer terrifying, but invigorating. The house feels different, too. Without the constant buzz of chore charts and hydration reminders, the living room has space to breathe. I moved the coffee table to face the windows, where morning light spills across the floorboards, and I've placed a comfortable armchair there. It's where I sit with a mug of coffee, freshly ground, brewed slow, reading novels that don't feature princesses or playground dramas, but characters who wrestle with their own destinies. It's remarkable how liberating it is to read a page without calculating when to cut it short for bedtime stories. Work has picked up, too. Freed from the hidden guilt of being too busy for my own projects, I've been able to take on a freelance contract writing budget analyses for a nonprofit. The irony isn't lost on me. Numbers used for social good rather than running family budgets. My evenings are no longer dictated by allergy charts or meal prep. I choose to stay late at my desk because I'm invested, not out of obligation. And when I decide to shut it down, I shut it down. No guilt, no second thoughts. On weekends, I've returned to passions I shelved long ago. I dusted off my father's old motorcycle, its engine growled to life after months of tinkering. And feel the wind rushing past on country roads, my worries left clinging to guardrails. I enrolled in a night photography class at the community center, camera in hand, learning to capture the world in new frames. Each shot teaches me patience and perspective, reminding me that beauty is often found in the unplanned moments. A stray beam of light through a cracked window, the blur of headlights on wet pavement, a stray cat slinking through an alley at dusk. Occasionally, I get updates on the aftermath of Marion's Sapphire Valley trip. Word spread that the hotel failed to accommodate Marion's dietary restrictions, Talia's suitcase vanished on the return flight, and Delilah got sunburned in a spot they neglected to stock with sunscreen. Their group photo, once posted with glee, now comes with a fresh apology. Lesson learned. I have not replied. I don't need to remind them that they blame me for every mishap. Now they must reckon with their own oversights. Our group chat still exists, but it's a ghost of its former frenzy. The name Unavailable sticks. It makes me smile whenever a notification pops up. It's become our inside joke, a reminder that availability is a gift, not a given. If Delilah asks to borrow my car, she checks first. If Marion needs a ride to an appointment, she proposes 3 time slots and lets me choose. Talia messages to coordinate weekends ahead of time, then waits patiently for my confirmation. Each request feels respectful, like a handshake instead of a grabbing hand. I've started volunteering at the youth center on Saturday mornings, mentoring a small group of middle school kids working on a financial literacy project. I teach them spreadsheets and budgeting, but more importantly, I show them how to carve out time for their own goals amidst life's demands. Watching their eyes light up when they realize they can balance a mini budget as easily as they scroll through social media gives me a profound sense of purpose. I'm no longer just the guy who fixes fences or runs errands. I'm someone who empowers others to plan for their futures. Friends have noticed the change, too. Last week, over beers at our favorite pub, one of my college buddies nudged me and said, "You look happy, man. Like you finally got your groove back." I raised my glass to him, feeling gratitude for a life I almost forgot belonged to me. The laughter that followed wasn't hurried, interrupted, or tinged with tension. It was pure, unfiltered joy shared between friends who value time as much as companionship. Even family gatherings feel lighter now. When Delilah and the girls invited me to a barbecue last weekend, I confirmed a week in advance and asked what time. I arrived early, armed with my own dish, and joined them in the backyard. There were no schedules pinned to clipboards, no arguments about who should read the next story, no underlying stress that I'd disappear at a moment's notice. We talked, we ate, we laughed. When the kids called for me to pass the ketchup or cut up watermelon, it felt natural rather than transactional. I was present, not performing. As I sit here tonight, the open windows framing a sky pricked with stars, I feel a gratitude deeper than any I've known. My phone rests silent on the side table. Tomorrow's calendar holds appointments I chose, not appointments chosen for me. I've crossed the threshold from caretaker to collaborator, from silent background to active participant in my own life. The freedom I sought in Belize has found a permanent residence here, in the quiet corners of my home, in the unhurried rituals I now call my own. And in that freedom, I have discovered the most profound truth of all. To live fully for others, I first must live fully for myself.